To players, fighting game protagonists are all reliable, or new reliable depending on when they were introduced. They have a moveset that's easier to pick up, and they're involved in one of the major plot lines of the game to give you a good viewing of the game's story. But sometimes, fighting games have a protagonist that is just less interesting than their fellow roster members. Maybe they shouldn't even be the protagonist. So for this video, I'll take a look at some of the worst fighting game protagonists. Now to be honest, I think protagonists in fighting games are generally pretty solid, so there wasn't a big pool of characters to me, and the biggest crime some of the lesser ones commit is that they're just a bit boring, if you even care about fighting game stories like I do. As such, the lower half of this list will mostly just be characters who are a bit bland or not as cool as other potential protagonists in their series. That being said, if you like any character on this list, I'm happy to hear that, and I'm just not that negative to truly hate any fighter. Most of the time, it's just story reasons for me, but maybe gameplay will be a factor depending on the character. Another note, I want to discuss more well-known franchises for this list, since those protagonists tend to have at least a couple of games to show off in, or are in a series with rich lore. It'd be easy if I could just riff on Joe from Aggressors of Dark Combat, or whoever the main character of Time Killers is. Third note, protagonist also means secondary or tertiary main characters. Not every fighting game just has a single main character. And final note, one character per series of origin. Now, let's dig through the top 10 worst fighting game protagonists. Number 10, Ryo Sakazaki from The Art of Fighting. Now hold on, I like Ryo. He was on my top 10 karate fighting game characters list. He's only a victim of me wanting to cover more well-known franchises for this video, and being lower than a lot of other protagonists on my overall main characters list. I think he's fun to play. He's a Shoto-style moveset with a rapid punch, so he's nice and easy to pick up. And he's a noble guy. He just wants to protect his family after his sister was kidnapped in the first game, and his father was forced to work for the mob under duress. Put it all together and you got a nice classic martial arts movie plotline and playstyle. It's just, I found Ryo to be less interesting than his co-star Robert, and his sister Yuri, and his father Takuma, and his potential love interest King. But then he's like number 5 of my Art of Fighting characters, so yeah, that's why he falls a bit short as a protagonist. I like him, but the supporting cast is a lot more interesting to me. That being said, he gets the job done as the stoic karate guy, so I completely understand why he's the lead in this serious fighting game. Ryo got to be the main character in the first 2 Art of Fighting games, and then his friend Robert took over as the main character in the 3rd game. I've spoken about the Art of Fighting 3 before, but I really liked Robert as a protagonist. He was fun and flashy, and Ryo was a good supporting friend as the number 2 in that game, saying, "What the hell are you doing, man?" running after the main villain and such. That game made it stand out to me how much more I would have liked other characters getting a lead role over Ryo. Yuri would have been a cool main character if the series continued after 3. With no other Art of Fighting games, the group of 5 characters would now appear regularly in the King of Fighters series as side story characters. They were all mainstays of the roster, and that's actually what got me to like Ryo over the years. Since he wasn't the main character anymore, I liked having him as this super serious karate fighter that just so happened to walk into all these world-ending scenarios by accident. He just wanted a tournament. Plus, he was on a team now with more laid-back characters, like Robert or Yuri doing her butt taunt, or his father pretending to be the anonymous wise old Mr. Karate, and then the rest of the team is like, "Dad, we know it's you." He's a good comedic straight man here. In the end, I think Ryo benefits from having a team to bounce his personality off of, and if anything, this video let me praise him a lot more than you would have expected, despite putting him with the quote-unquote worst. Number 9, Hanzo from World Heroes. This is another character who's cool, he's got nice moves, but I feel he's bland compared to his main rival in the series who's not the main character. Granted, we're talking about World Heroes here, which is not a story-intensive game, but they gave us multiple arcade mode endings and told us Hanzo was the main character, so the series is in the running for this topic. World Heroes gathers fighters from all over history to fight in one big tournament in the modern day with some not so so modern arenas. Plenty of fictionalized historical figures and completely made up people are on the roster, and their version of famed ninja Hanzo Hattori makes sense as a main character. It's just they gave him no personality and they made his rival way more interesting. All Hanzo talks about is finding strong opponents, which a lot of fighting game characters do to be fair, but with how exaggerated some of the personas of these historical figures are, I feel he could have been a bit more intense. They just made him Ryu, and my main comparison of what kind of personality I would have liked him to have is his rival Fuma, who's also from the same era of history, but for whatever reason, he likes being in the modern day and has a transformation persona where he's a generic blonde businessman when he's not in his big red-haired appearance. Like, look at it, that sounds like such a good premise for a protagonist. Ninja from the 1500s disguised as a salaryman by day, but ninja by night. Fuma could get his own sitcom, let alone a fighting game lead role. So by comparison, Hanzo feels more generic as the protagonist, and to be fair, that's more praise towards Fuma than criticism towards Hanzo, but that's why it's a low entry. Though if we want more unfair comparisons, Samurai Shodown, which is also owned by SNK, has their own version of Hanzo Hattori, and his moveset is a lot cooler with bouncing fire and such, and I like his design better. Like if you look up SNK's Hanzo Hattori, it'll likely be the Samurai Shodown one that comes up first. But as mentioned, that's unfair, and World Heroes' only real flaw is having a less interesting Hanzo than a completely different game. Number 8. Andy Bogard from Fatal Fury. Terry Bogard is known as the Fatal Fury protagonist because he is, de facto, no questions asked. He's the cool guy who says the iconic phrases and does the big punches well. But Fatal Fury had a protagonist trio, at least at the beginning, and unfortunately for Andy, he's always been the weakest in terms of presence. He's Terry's younger brother and fills a similar role as him in the story. Their dad was killed by his old training partner, Geese Howard, and they both wanted revenge against him in battle during Geese's big tournament. Canonically, Terry gets the vengeance for them and Andy loses on the way up, but he's still a deuteragonist, so he gets credit for attempting. Then Andy would constantly keep going back to Japan to hone his ninjutsu skills, and came back to Southtown whenever there was a new tournament invitation sent to him, aka they wanted him back on the roster. If you like a stoic character, maybe Andy's for you, but comparing him to his bombastic brother and to the third protagonist Joe, who's their friend with Muay Thai wind powers, Andy's a bit too subdued to carry that main character appeal for me. Another thing I felt he lacked compared to his co-protagonists is his moves never reached mainstream appeal. You know them if you know SNK games, but not like how people outside the fandom know, "Are you okay? Buster Wolf!" And I've always felt that Joe's Hurricane Upper had some niche iconicness, but I don't feel that with any of Andy's moves. And don't get me wrong, his arc kick Kuha Dan and his elbow dash Zane Ken are cool and I remember them, but I don't think they're as well known to the public. Though the elephant in the room of why some people don't like Andy, or at the very least envy him, is Mai Shiranui is in love with him and he just isn't interested. Now fine, don't force a relationship if you don't want it, but I feel when she's that head over heels for you for so long, you gotta be partially to blame. You can't just say, hey, I get it, you're nice, I'm just not interested. Or is he that oblivious? Or, to give Andy some credit, maybe Mai is just that persistent or oblivious herself. Really, Mai in general feels like the true secondary protagonist of the series at this point, evident by her inclusion in Street Fighter VI alongside Terry, and the City of the Wolves default roster without Andy. He was later DLC. In the end, I think Andy is just more built to live in the shadows rather than in the protagonist spotlight, and that's okay. Also, shoutouts to the Andy Bogard fans out there. I respect rooting for the underdog. Number 7. Marie Rose from Dead or Alive. As funny as it sounds, Dead or Alive does care about its plot lines. It is the sexy fighting game first and foremost, but there's a lot of care put into their stories. That being said, Dead or Alive 6 felt like they were just coasting with the story in that game. Still, a lot of cutscenes. It had a bunch of branching stories that kinda came together, so it felt like there were a lot of main characters, but in the end, Kasumi was the default like in every game. Still, Still, I say we can count the characters leading the bigger storylines in this game as protagonists, and one of the plot lines was when rich lady Helena asked her worker Marie Rose to go on an escort mission to make sure the fighter Honoka stayed out of harm's way before the upcoming tournament. Since this was the last big setup in the story's prologue, I always viewed Marie Rose as one of the game's main characters, and I actually thought the story was going to primarily focus on her before everyone else started doing more important stuff. Honoka's protection seemed like it was a big deal, and Marie was introduced in Dead or Alive 5's DLC, so she wasn't in that game's story, and I felt like they wanted to do more with her. Anyway, regarding her being a main character, she doesn't feel like a bad protagonist, but she kinda had nothing to do. She just doesn't have the big moments that the other lead characters had. It was mostly her and Honoka walking around, Honoka goads somebody into a fight, and Marie is like, "Honoka, no, I have to protect you," and then one of them fights. And then repeat that 5 times. Honoka feels like the show stealer of the duo, since it's funny how genuine she is at wanting to copy other fighters' moves, to a point where you see why she needs someone to look after her. She gets right in everyone's face. These gags do have some good comedic beats to them, but I feel these characters are too stilted in how they're animated. Marie needs the physics and reactions of a Looney Tunes character. When Honoka ultimately does get captured, Marie tags along on the rescue mission, and I thought this was where she was going to have her big moment, but they just kinda brush her off to the side and give her a couple of small moments since she's still around. They basically write her off by having Helena join the rescue squad, tell Marie she did a good job, and Helena finishes that part of the story. Though it is still a nice moment that Marie thought she was going to be reprimanded, and Helena is like, no, it's not a big deal. Honestly, the more I write this entry, the more I'm kinda rooting for Marie to finally catch a break. As I said, the lower half of this list are for characters who aren't even that bad. If anything, it's a way to get compliments in. Does she deserve another shot at being the protagonist? Well, I like some other Dead or Alive characters more than her, so I would say no thank you, but if you like her, why not? Number 6, Lars from Tekken, but really, Jin Kazama specifically in Tekken 6. I don't even think this is about Lars being bad as a protagonist, as much as it is him being in a story that's a mess in Tekken 6. On his own, Lars is protagonist material. He's related to one of the primary antagonists of the series Heihachi, being Lars' estranged father. He's on a mission to stop Jin's corporation, being the previous protagonist of Tekken 3 through 5, and Lars has a versatile moveset making him easy to pick up. So it's the perfect mix of protagonist stuff, and he passes the personality test. He's a special forces man who's after the threats that the Mishima bloodline puts out there, so he's a respectable guy. He's more or less realistic with his reactions. He's not stoic. He'll be angry when it's time for anger, he'll cry when there's something sad, he can joke around if need be, but this universe is constantly on edge, so there's not much time to smile. I like how he just makes and breaks alliances as soon as he sees it fit for the mission. But Lars' unintentional issue is, he was the lead character in Tekken 6, which was an awkward time to enter the series. We just had the last 3 games with Jin as the brooding main character, who is trying to rid himself of the devil powers forced upon him. And after taking over the family Mishima Zaibatsu in Tekken 6, he decided to start multiple wars across the world, playing it completely straight that he was antagonistic now. But it was all just a way to lure out an ancient demon that feeds on conflict that would cure his devil powers and allegedly stop other bad things around the world if it's defeated. But no one points out that it doesn't undo all the hardships that Jin caused by doing this, so I think it was a horrible portrayal of Jin. It was such an odd reason for him to go full villain and act like he thinks it's justified. The one thing that prevents him from getting a full entry on this list is he's technically not the protagonist in this portrayal, so he's not doing bad protagonist things here, he's doing bad antagonist things. As such, Lars will share the spot since he is the protagonist in that game. As mentioned, the main issue with Lars is how the series treats Tekken 6 like a filler arc with lingering effects. The protagonists focus specifically on the direct family in every game except this one. Kazuya in Tekken 1, Heihachi in 2, Jin in 3 through 5, back to Kazuya in 7, and Jin again in 8. But for 6 only, we shift to a completely different character as the lead, and I do like the variety here, but but I think Lars needed to be introduced as a supporting character first to make it not as jarring when he became the protagonist, like how Asuka or Reina were brought in as relatives to the Mishima family first, but not the lead character, though they do have potential to become it if they ever wanted to, or at least close a storyline first rather than leave the Mishima bloodline plot on hold for a game. Like if Lars came in after Tekken 7 closed the Heihachi chapter, I think it could have been a better place in the timeline for a new storyline. However, that still goes back to Jin just being a weird antagonist, so you know what? Keep on doing your thing, Lars. You've proven that you're relevant in games after Tekken 6, so just punch Jin in the face when you get a chance.
You win.
Number 5. Shun'ei from the King of Fighters. Can I just say, this one's really from the vibes. Shun'ei seems fine for a main character, but he never really made an impact with me like the other newcomers in the King of Fighters 14 or 15 did, or even like previous protagonists. He was a young fighter with powers beyond his control. He went to the Elder Master Tung Fu Ru, who trained Terry Bogard, Geese Howard, and various other great fighters, and Shun was going to be Tung's last student, so this was a good setup. The final student from the master who raised protagonists and antagonists alike. Shun'ei has the powers to create giant hands of fire and water, and to hinder those powers so they don't destroy us all, he has special headphones that calm them, along with being a metaphor about how he isolates himself from others. These powers also seem to be related to the mysterious creatures that have been invading during the storyline with him, so he has a connection to the bosses. We even see his character growth where he feels he can finally take off his headphones because he can better control his skills and is more open to talking with people. All this sets up for your standard anime protagonist, and yet he never made a major splash despite being the de facto protagonist and in our face a lot. He's the default character to choose, he's on the cover of the King of Fighters 15, but I just don't think of him when I see these games. Some people have said he's a bit too over-designed with all the colors, blue hair, and then every other color on his clothing, but others have said it's just the lack of exciting story that showcases him. The past King of Fighters games that put the main character on the spotlight had storylines that lasted a few games and were very in your face. Kyo and Iori had Orochi, K-Dash and his team had Nests, and Ash Crimson, well, he was Ash Crimson and people just remember him. But Shun'ei feels overshadowed by all the classic characters returning in the games that he's in, like the Samurai Showdown team, or the Sacred Treasures team getting back together, or the Orochi team being back, though that one might be for the Shurmy hype, and for the Sacred Treasures team, that just might be because I like Chizuru a lot. But even looking at the other new characters in the games that he was in, I saw more people hyping Conan and Dolores over Shun'ei. Of course, I just might chalk that up to my own personal preferences. I do respect the setup of his story and how often the series swaps out protagonists, but Shun'ei just never did it for me. And if I'm just not up to date on the King of Fighters fan faves and Shun'ei is more loved, then good. I'm glad he's getting the appreciation I wish I could give him. Number 4. Andrew from Samurai Showdown. Samurai Showdown 6 is kind of a mess if you're looking for a story. There's no centralized villain. They're just giving you every character possible, since it was the last of the traditional games at the time, so it was more like an update on how everyone is doing. Every boss was in play depending on who you ran in the arcade ladder. As such, there was no big villain bringing everyone together. I always assumed the protagonist of this game was just the default series protagonists, like Haomaru or Yoshitora, but they introduced 4 new characters in this game, 2 of which were labeled as the new protagonists. One was Iroha, who was a hot maid that might have actually been a bird this whole time. She was received well enough to a point where she was brought back in the reboot. I discussed her on my Characters That Break the Fourth Wall video. But a character that never took off was Andrew, and he was considered the other protagonist of the game, possibly even the default. As mentioned, there was no focal story, so he more or less felt like like the protagonist because he had the most going on being new to the series and such. He wanted to conquer the world, but for the sake of giving everyone freedom, and he eventually gathers a coalition with a bunch of other characters to fulfill that. And his ending implies he basically turns the world into America since he conquers other nations with his coalition. I don't know, he's not a bad guy, but he's technically trying to take over the world. Like, that's a Rolento goal in Street Fighter Alpha. It feels like it could lead to a Power Corrupts plotline. That could have been his follow-up story if the series continued, but instead it got rebooted, and that's all we got from Andrew. Not sure what people thought of his backstory, but some fans found him to be a bit too out of place. Unlike the other protagonists from Edo-era Japan, Andrew is from early United States of America in the late 1700s, and while other characters have been from that general area in the games before, they were never the lead character of a game. For his moveset, he uses the bayonet at the end of his gun to slash, and he shoots eagle projectiles, which I at least respect for the America angle. It saves him from just having generic slashes. That being said, his gun still plays like a sword, so it is kinda generic. I do think it's cool that they went beyond the expected samurai protagonist for game number 6, but I suppose there's a reason Iroha took off, but Andrew didn't.
Good luck. 私には理想がある。負けるわけにはいかない。
Number 3, Taven from Mortal Kombat. Taven is just a guy. Sure, he's half god with fire powers and a dragon tattoo on his face, but he just feels like a random guy who is all of a sudden main character in Mortal Kombat Armageddon. He's the son of a god named Argus and a sorceress named Delia, and he only reawakens when the Armageddon event is taking place in the universe, where the fabric of reality is ripping due to all the combat, so a fire guy named Blaze emerges atop a pyramid to be the final battle for anyone who reaches him to give them unlimited power, and they can just use it for good or evil or whatever, he doesn't care. Also, all the fighters are trying to get to the top at once, so there will be casualties. Argus determined that his sons would be the saviors of the universe since he's the protector, and they would make it to the top. Unfortunately, one son Dagon woke up early since he realized he could use his power for personal gain, so Taven is the sole good guy here. And thus, Taven now has to meet a bunch of weirdos from the Mortal Kombat universe and deal with his own brother standing in his way, countering his own godlike power. The big issue here, though, is Taven is as plain as shredded wheat. Now, to be fair, the point of the story mode is he's meeting people he's never seen before, so the appeal is more him meeting the Mortal Kombat universe from the perspective of an outsider, and throughout all this, he's slowly gaining back his skills, so he can't use all of his godlike power against the normal fighters at once until he completes his journey. But when it's all said and done, his fully realized powers are just fire powers, which we've seen in the series. Liu Kang has them, other characters have them, and he just uses them as projectiles and various charging punches. I get that he's supposed to be a jack of all trades for beginners, but they could have at least made him cooler. So basic moveset combined with blank personality was a recipe for boring protagonist. They kind of acknowledged his genericness in production when they just called him Bob when they didn't have his fantastical name yet. His brother's production name was Doug as well, so it was the adventures of Doug and Bob for a bit. The other reason I'm not that fond of Taven is Mortal Kombat Armageddon was supposed to be the big finale to the series, the Everyone is Here game, since we did not know if we were going to get another Mortal Kombat at the time. For the conclusion, I didn't really want some new character. Make this an adventure with the legacy characters at the helm for one final outing. Save the new protagonists for stories in the middle, or just new chapters in the series, like how we got a new main character in the prior game to Armageddon that was not a series-ending story. I admire when they try to change protagonists and not just fall back on the favorites, just this did not feel like the right time. Or at the very least, relate him to more existing characters, like how Shujinko in the previous game learned a move each from a handful of legacy characters, or how Cassie Cage in Mortal Kombat X was the daughter of series mainstays Johnny Cage and Sonya Blade. In the end, I understood the idea of Taven, but I just wasn't a fan of the execution, and it ultimately didn't matter since we were far from the end of the series. And hey, now he gets to be the guy that cameos in arcade mode endings. I'm sure he's real happy about that.
Finish her.
Number 2. Abel from Street Fighter. Abel being labeled as the Street Fighter 4 main character put choosing a Street Fighter rep for this list on easy mode since I had no idea who it was going to be before I learned that. If not explicitly shown, I've always assumed Ryu is the main character of a Street Fighter game since he tends to be the default. He was the de facto protagonist of Street Fighter 1, 2, and Alpha. Street Fighter 3 highlighted Alex as the protagonist, and 6 made it clear it was Luke. But in 4 and 5, Ryu still got the box art spotlight and was highlighted in the story, so you could assume he was the protagonist just by looking. But in 2021, when Luke got his early introduction as the upcoming protagonist for Street Fighter 6, they released a picture of him meeting the prior protagonists, to which we learned Rashid was the protagonist of Street Fighter 5, which does make sense since he was on his own journey in Street Fighter 5's story and directly met Ryu, and for Street Fighter 4, it was Abel, which was kind of a surprise to me. He was so quiet in Street Fighter 4, like it was a big deal that he was an escaped body from the Shadaloo facility, but main character status? Okay, I can see it working, but I don't think he was that good for the role since he never felt front and center. He felt more like a supporting character. However, him being the apparent main character does explain why he was the official rival to the final boss Seth, and that is a big deal, and he's the one that revealed to Abel who he was. Abel had amnesia and was trying to figure out his past, to which Seth reveals Abel was an artificial body that thought he was human and escaped Shadaloo. While this is a direct conflict with the game's final boss, it felt like such a side story. It didn't feel like the big protagonist-antagonist confrontation that it should be. Cammy was revealed to be an artificial body for Bison in Super Street Fighter 2, and they didn't think that was main character worthy, so what makes Abel? Regardless, by the time Street Fighter 4 got its Super update, Abel was pretty much brushed off to the side, alongside the other Street Fighter 4 newcomers, since this was the update that added Jury, who pretty much was the new protagonist, antagonist, and anything else depending on your viewpoint. I'd say villain with anti-hero motives. Jury was even the default player 1 after the update, which pretty much indicated where the game was going. With her as a main villain, it actually pointed towards Chun-Li getting the spotlight as a main hero, which I liked for the direction. And in Street Fighter 5, Abel was in the story mode, but it was a very random moment, where after the team infiltrates Shadaloo, Abel comes out of nowhere undercover. Chun-Li even expositions us by saying, "Ah, so you being in the base means you've been working undercover instead of being around us and not on the roster," and Abel is just like, yeah. They do show how the dormant psycho power can awaken inside of him after Shadaloo's master plan goes into motion, giving the story payoff after introducing him as a Shadaloo body, but it felt like they just stuck him in there to wrap up that story without spending a roster spot on him. And thus, Abel is a piece of Street Fighter history. I don't see anyone ask for him back on future rosters, except me that one time because I like his judo grappling moveset, but he's a bit too blank of a character for people to latch on to. I had fun doing his rolls, wheelie kicks, and spinny throws, but yeah, unfortunately for Abel, there's about a dozen other characters I'd like to see back before him.
I want to know it all.
For number 1, I picked the character who just felt like the face of bad fighting game protagonists, mainly due to how much you wanted to punch him in the face. Number 1, Patroclus from Soul Calibur. It's an entry about Soul Calibur 5, so I have to preface it with my 2 notes I always bring up about the game in my videos. First off, I played it a lot, more than some of the other Soul Caliburs, since I like how they did the enhanced moves and supers in this game. It was very fun. I might have not liked other aspects of the game, but I did like the mechanics. And second, there was poor execution with the roster. They replaced about half the classic roster with students and children of the older characters, with pretty much the same moves but a new coat of paint and less appealing personalities since it was 17 years in the future after the last game. Among these were the children of former main character Sophidia, now taking main character roles, being Patroclus and Pyrrha. Pyrrha I give a pass to since she was just using her mother's moveset who had died between games, games, and when Pyrrha gets malfested by the Wicked Sword Soul Edge, she uses the more aggressive fighting style of Sophidia's sister Cassandra, who was also missing from this game, which has always been similar to Sophidia's fighting style, so logically it would make sense that Pyrrha's fighting style evolves that way. Also, I just think her Omega form is really cool, so my bias helps her avoid this list. Patroclus though, he had an insufferable personality, bad story, and part of his moveset was disappointing. He was the true lead of the game, even being on the box art, but he was an arrogant son of a something or other, and he was just unlikable. Now you could give him the benefit of the doubt since he was young and being misled by the villain who became Nightmare in this game, so he was going to improve, but I feel they never acknowledged that he starts off the game by killing normal people that he was told were malfested. Like, he is so smug about easily killing people that were telling him, "No, I'm not infected, please don't kill me!" Then when he realized he was duped, he goes through an arc of self-discovery, which was rushed due to the rushed production of the game, and then he gets to be the good guy. No repercussions for all those people he killed, they don't matter since they're not on the roster. And then he became enlightened, and honestly, he was boring this way. They could have kept him with a bit of his old arrogance and had him be more noble about it, but it was such a switch from guy you wanted to punch in the face to a lame guy. The bigger issue to me with his enlightened form, known as Patroclus Alpha, was the moveset. He went from a unique sword and shield moveset in his default form to a single sword as Alpha, which was just the moveset of the character Setsuka from previous games, who was left off this roster in favor of Patroclus Alpha. At least between the Pyrrha forms, they were similar movesets with some moves in common. Here though, it just felt like they didn't have time to design Setsuka, so they just slapped an unused moveset on Patroclus and called it a day. The sword slashes are not even close to what he was doing before. At least the original moveset was a new but simple style, but this just makes me want to see Setsuka as the main character. The reputation of Soul Calibur 5 made it where the series seemed like it distanced itself from it by the next game, rebooting it to the beginning of the series, so there's no way to show Patroclus' smug and or bland face again without twisting the timeline. If I could say anything nice about him, I liked his default moveset, especially when you do that combo where he goes, "Fear my skills, forfeit!"
You're finished! Fear my skills! Forfeit!
So for being the best at being the worst, depending on what you're judging, Patroclus takes the top spot as the worst fighting game protagonist.
I will show you the price of justice!
KO.
Don't feel bad about it. You couldn't have prevailed.
Now, what did you think? Were all these main characters flawed, or do I just have bad taste that makes good things seem bad? And who are some of your least favorite fighting game protagonists, whether I discussed them or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.